Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are breaking down a highly practical, concrete framework derived directly from Mobisoft's 2026 practices. We're going to look at exactly how to evaluate offshore software development vendors. If you're a B2B enterprise buyer, you already know how incredibly difficult it is to separate genuine engineering talent from a really shiny marketing facade. Well, by the end of this explainer, you'll have a structured system to completely avoid those superficial traps and uncover the true capabilities of any potential offshore partner. Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start off with the vendor evaluation trap. Then we'll uncover some signals of genuine quality and explore complex and regulated domains. After that, we'll discuss the compounding team advantage, walk through delivery and commitment standards, and finally, we'll wrap up with the absolutely crucial questions you need to ask before you sign anything. All right, let's jump straight into our first topic, the vendor evaluation trap. 22,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of NASSCOM-registered software development companies in India alone. And honestly, that doesn't even count the unregistered ones. We're talking about an incredibly saturated sea of vendors. The terrifying reality here is that the gap between a world-class engineering team and a shop that's just going to produce costly technical debt, well, it's expertly hidden behind beautifully polished marketing. And that brings us to the core issue, what buyers usually look at versus what actually matters. Buyers so often focus on weak signals, right? Like, how pretty is their website? Are the case studies impressive? How cheap is the hourly rate? But look, a polished website isn't going to fix spaghetti code. This framework reveals that what actually dictates the success of your software is the stuff you don't see on the homepage. What really matters are documented architecture standards, strict code-based standards, and deep, specialized domain expertise. If you're only looking at the surface level, you're playing a very, very expensive guessing game. So how do we spot the real deal? Let's talk about the signals of genuine quality. The absolute most crucial point is captured right here in this golden rule. No architecture document, no code. This rule instantly shifts the conversation from just theory into practice. It communicates an exceptionally high bar for engineering standards. Basically, it means that discovery and architectural planning absolutely must precede any actual development. A good vendor won't write a single line of code until a rigorous architecture document, covering everything from database schemas to API design, is completely reviewed and approved. Beyond that architecture first rule, you want to look for a few other structural signals. First up, production product ownership. Do they actually own and operate live enterprise-grade products themselves? That proves they have skin in the game and aren't just building for others. Second, their domain knowledge shouldn't just be slick marketing copy. It must actively drive engineering during discovery. And finally, you want to see live vertical slice software demos every single 2 weeks, not just some spreadsheet telling you a feature is 70% done. Now, to really see this in action, let's explore complex and regulated domains. In these complex domains, you'll see the massive difference between an order taker and a true engineering partner. A generic vendor just waits for you to tell them the rules, but an expert partner, they anticipate them. For example, in healthcare, if a vendor doesn't architect for HIPAA compliance and FHIR or for interoperability from day one, retrofitting it later is going to cost you a staggering $60,000 to $200,000. Or in fintech, failing to design idempotent transactions means duplicate charges when network requests fail. An expert brings these constraints to the table before you even have to ask. Let me give you another concrete example, this time from logistics. A 15% suboptimal route algorithm costs a 100-vehicle fleet $300,000 annually in wasted fuel and time. That vividly illustrates the sheer financial stakes we're talking about here. If your vendor lacks true domain-specific engineering depth, like if they just plug in a basic map API instead of geospatial route optimization, you are literally bleeding money every single day. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the compounding team advantage. It is such a common misconception that sprint velocity remains flat and constant over time. It really doesn't. As product context, domain expertise, and code-based familiarity accumulate, a well-structured team's velocity actually compounds. In months 1 through 3, you're in the investment phase, operating at maybe 70% velocity. But looking farther out to months 7 through 12, a dedicated team will actually deliver 30% to 45% higher output, hitting 115% velocity compared to their first 3 months. You end up getting way more value for the exact same cost. But here's the catch. Reaching that compounded velocity doesn't just happen by accident. It requires a really rigorous 90-day onboarding design. Mobisoft breaks this into 3 phases. The foundation phase, which is days 1 to 14, is intense. You should expect the dev environment to be completely set up and a first pull request to be submitted by day 7. Then comes the contribution phase, followed by acceleration. Listen, onboarding is a design problem, not a talent problem. Let's shift gears to delivery and commitment standards. The classic tension in software development is always between a fixed budget and agile flexibility, right? Well, this 3-layer commitment model resolves that brilliantly. You lock in budget predictability through a fixed architecture and technical scope. But you maintain an adaptable product scope, which means feature prioritization can shift sprint by sprint based on actual user feedback. Finally, you have fixed quality standards, so automated testing and code reviews happen no matter what. It's the best of both worlds. And when you're evaluating that progress, please remember this. A status report showing a feature is 70% complete tells you absolutely nothing. It is frankly a useless metric. On the other hand, a 25-minute working software demo showing a live feature, complete with all the edge cases and error states, now that tells you everything. You must demand working software at the end of every 2-week sprint. No exceptions. We are down to our final section, the questions you need to ask before you sign. You must demand specific evidence at every single stage of the evaluation process. On the initial discovery call, are they asking domain-specific questions or just talking about pricing? During the reference call, don't just ask if the client liked them. Ask the hard questions, like, what went over budget and how was it handled? And crucially, insist on a paid discovery and architecture sprint before you commit to full development. If they refuse to build an architecture document first, just walk away. So, armed with this rigorous evaluation framework, it is time to move past superficial marketing claims. Your business deserves structural proof of quality. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. When you step into your very next vendor meeting, what will you ask them before you sign on the dotted line? Will you accept polished case studies, or will you demand to see their architecture standards? The choice is entirely yours, and the financial stakes literally couldn't be higher. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep asking the hard questions and keep learning.